The Maple Leafs fell short of expectations yet again. Is Mitch Marner out of there? And should the Devils pounce on that opportunity? We have a lot to break down in today's episode of Locked On Devils. Buckle up, everybody.
You're Locked On Devils, your daily podcast on the New Jersey Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, this is Bryce Salvador, and you're Locked On Devils with Trey Matthews.
Scores! Oh, Stevens stepped up, nailed it. Brodor's got the puck. What a shot. The Devils win the Stanley Cup.
Alrighty now, what is up, New Jersey? Welcome back to the Locked On Devils podcast here at the Locked On Network. I'm your host, College Hockey Play announcer, Devils are our pucks, pitchforks, and also part-time credential media member, Trey Matthews. What's on the agenda for today's episode? Well, let's talk some silly season, particularly with the Toronto Maple Leafs. Mitch Marner is set to become a UFA once summer rolls around, and rumors are circulating that he might leave the Maple Leafs because, let's face it, for many years, they haven't really gone anywhere. They've stayed stagnant. They're a great regular season team, but come the playoffs, they can never get over the hump. Sheldon Keefe was unfortunately a victim of it. He was fired last season by the organization once the playoffs concluded. Then he made his way to New Jersey. I think Sheldon Keefe did a pretty good job, and I'm sure Sheldon Keefe is sitting at home just smiling ear to ear saying, hey, I wasn't the problem after all, like you guys were making it out to be. But anyway, getting back on track. In the first segment, I will share my main takeaways from the Maple Leafs season. I won't go into great detail because obviously I don't cover the Maple Leafs, but I think based on how they've been performing the last few years, in fact, not the last few years, but just many years, because they have lost 7 straight winner-take-all matchups. That's incredible and just hard to process, because that's like if you flip a coin, what are the chances of it landing on tails 7 times in a row? Very unlikely. So the fact that the Maple Leafs can never close out in the clutch, that has me a little concerned. And one of their star players, Mitch Marner, might leave in free agency. So we'll go over Marner's numbers and what he could possibly contribute to the Devils. Then in the second segment, I will make my final verdict. Should the Devils pursue Marner? Because the Devils offense did take a couple steps backwards this past season. They were focusing more on defense, and that definitely showed. I think getting a better goaltending tandem really helped them. But it's just like they got shut out way too many times, I think it's safe to say. Then in the third and final segment, speaking of Sheldon Keefe, I want to use that final segment to vent my frustrations, because I've said it ad nauseum on this show. I think NHL coaches need a longer leash, because it seems like NHL teams just recycle coaches every single year. The longest tenured coach is John Cooper in Tampa Bay, and rumors are circulating that he might leave the Lightning to pursue the Utah job. I don't think it's open, but maybe Utah will make some space for him. I don't really know. But anyway, let me just share my quick thoughts on the Maple Leafs, because it does hit close to home. And here's why. I said it in a prior episode. I don't want the Devils to become like the Maple Leafs, where they have a lot of talent, but yet they can never get over the hump. I think the Maple Leafs are a good example of having all sorts of talent on their roster, but yet they still have not hoisted a Stanley Cup. In fact, the last time they hoisted a cup, you would have to go back to the 1960s. For reference, neither one of my parents were born then. They're going to kill me for saying that, but I'm just putting that out there. I'm in my mid-20s, if you're curious. Marner, 102 points. Then you got William Nylander, Austin Matthews, John Tavares, Matthew Nyes. You added some championship experience in Steven Lorentz. He was on the Panthers team last year that won the Stanley Cup. Joseph Woll, he's not the best goalie in the world, but I think he's far from worst. I think he's a pretty solid goalie. Yeah, he didn't really have his best showings during the playoffs, but I don't think he had much help in front of him. This is what I'm talking about when it comes to Tom Fitzgerald. Your window is not always going to be open. And if you can't get over that hump, or if you can't make huge strides forward, this is what I'm talking about. Some of your players might grow restless. And when their contracts are up, they might have to come to the difficult decision that maybe winning a Stanley Cup isn't in my best interest if I remain here. And I think that's what's going to happen with the Maple Leafs organization. They're in danger of losing Marner. Austin Matthews was quoted to say post-game that he felt as though there were too many passengers on the team, and Marner agreed with him. For me, that just shows a lack of direction, or a lack of accountability, a lack of coaching. Look, I love Craig Berube. He's a Stanley Cup champion. He was behind the bench for the Blues that won it in 2019. Jake Allen was on that team. I do want to see the Maple Leafs succeed. I'm not one of those people that's just going to crap on them and beat a dead horse. I'm not that type of person. I actually want to see them succeed. I have nothing against them. But honestly, this is just unacceptable. I really hope they're able to figure it out. But with all the talent you have, that window is not going to remain open forever. You can't just be a good regular season team and then come to playoffs, you take a couple steps backwards. Losing 7 straight winner-take-all games, that's Game 7 circumstances for reference. But if one door closes, another one opens. Marner set to become a UFA this offseason. He might leave the Maple Leafs for better opportunities. But where will those opportunities be? We're just going to have to wait and see. But here's what I do know about Marner. Let's look at his numbers. He appeared in 81 games. He had 27 goals, 5th on the team, 75 assists, led the team by a comfortable margin, 102 points, 1st on the team. He had a plus-minus rating of plus 18, 3rd on the team, 6 power play goals, 4th on the team, 27 power play assists, 1st on the team. He had 40 hits. That was 6th among Maple Leafs forwards. He had 56 takeaways, which was 1st on the team, but he had 106 giveaways, 1st on the team. He had 7 game-winning goals, 3rd on the team. He had an expected goals for rating of 62.5, 3rd on the team. He had an 8.1 offensive point share rating, 2nd on the team. A 2.5 defensive point share rating, 6th on the team, which gave him a point share rating of 10.6. He was tied for 1st alongside William Nylander. Now, Marner's a great player, but he was also criticized during the series, particularly his Game 5 performance, in which he had a brutal shift that resulted in Jesper Boqvist scoring. Shout out to former Devil Boqvist. Man, there's a lot of former Devils players on the Panthers roster. I'll probably talk about that in a future episode. But anyway, digressing a little bit, Marner, along with a lot of his teammates, were criticized heavily by the media. Rightfully so. Look, the Maple Leafs need to do something different. They can't continue to be stagnant come the playoffs. They're one of those franchises in North America where they're very recognizable. Their brand is everywhere. Everyone has a lot of opinions about their organization. They have a large fan base. They're like the Los Angeles Lakers, the Dallas Cowboys, the New York Yankees. One of the more recognizable sports brands in North America, I would say. It's not acceptable for them to be mediocre come the playoffs. They need to get a Stanley Cup at some point, but it's been many, many, many decades. So once again, I think the criticisms toward Marner and his teammates, some of it is justified, some of it not so much. Sheldon Keefe was never afraid to criticize Marner. Like, there were times in which Marner was benched because Sheldon felt as though Marner wasn't really giving his best efforts. Didn't really sit too well with Marner, but he took the criticism, made himself better. And whenever Marner did perform well, Sheldon Keefe always gave him praise. It's worth mentioning that during the course of this season, when asked about Jack Hughes' contribution on the PK, Sheldon actually compared Jack to Marner, saying that Jack sort of reminded him of Marner and his development because Marner was trying to become more of a two-way player. He was trying to be less of a liability defensively, and we saw the same growth with Jack. I find that quite compelling, if you ask me. Now, do I actually want Marner on the Devils? Well, we'll talk about that momentarily. But before we continue, let me tell you guys about Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place. So stop mismanaging your money and start building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery. Now I budget smarter and save more. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. Okay, is it a possibility for Marner to actually join the Devils? Why am I talking about this? Well, I read an article courtesy of James Nichols of New Jersey Hockey Now, and he talked about it, and he explained the logistics, how a contract might look. If you want to hear James's thoughts on the matter, I will leave a link to the article in the description. Here are my thoughts. I've been saying it throughout the course of the offseason so far, that the Devils need more scoring depth. I felt as though one of the reasons why they took a step back this past season is because they were still trying to replace the goal productivity of Tyler Toffoli. Because Toffoli, regardless of what you thought of him, he still was able to find the back of the net more consistently. He put the Devils' offense over the edge. He really was an X factor piece. Yes, he was leading the Devils in goals, but at the same time, I think it's safe to say that Toffoli, while he wasn't the fastest skater or the most physical player, he knew how to find his name into the score sheet, and he never really went on lengthy scoring droughts. And this is something that the Devils were struggling with this season, which is Paul Cotter, scoring drought. Stefan Nason, scoring drought. Eric Haula, scoring drought. Dawson Mercer, scoring drought. Players like Nathan Bashin, Tomas Tatar, Curtis Lazar, they're not really going to contribute all that much when it comes to racking up points. So what did the Devils do? Well, Fitzy did what he could do at the deadline. Unfortunately, the Devils couldn't really make a splashy move. We all know the circumstances. We all know the disappointment. But basically, the offseason is a chance to reconstruct everything. And Fitzgerald even said that the team wasn't going to bring back the same team from this past season. Just wasn't good enough. And with Marner set to become a UFA, maybe the Devils could look at him, just because I told you guys his numbers in the previous segment. He racks up a lot of points. He can contribute on the power play. He knows how to find himself into the score sheet. And once again, it's not like it would just be the Mitch Marner show. There will be other contributors as well. But then again, there were other contributors in Toronto. You had Matthews, who's one of the best players in the league right now. Nylander, Tavares, Nyes. Would this actually? Okay, anyway, I'm getting off topic here. And you know what? It's not even going to matter in the grand scheme of things. Should the Devils pursue Marner? That's the big question. The answer for me is no. According to AFP Analytics, Marner is projected to earn $12.96 million average annual value over 7 years. If you're curious, according to James, that would take up the entirety of the Devils' cap space this summer and then some. If New Jersey wanted to make it happen, I think it's safe to say they would have to clear house with certain players. Players like Dougie Hamilton, he'd certainly be gone. You'd probably need to get Andre Palat off the books. you can speculate all you want, but once again, you run into that issue. No movement clause for Hamilton. No movement clause for Palat. How would you move them? That's the big question. So and plus I think the Devils can be a little more frugal with their money. Oh, and I didn't even factor in Luke Hughes needs a new contract right now. Like he's an RFA. He needs a new contract. So, yeah, I don't think Mitch Marner is realistic. Would I want him on the Devils? Absolutely. But I think he's going to get a bag somewhere else. It's not going to be in New Jersey. The Devils can be way more frugal with their money. We talked about it in the Pucks and Pitchforks group chat. It's just not worth it. You got to think of everything as an investment. Marner, fantastic player, racks up the points, racks up the productivity. Yes, he has his flaws, but a lot of other players do. Sheldon Keefe is high on him, had high praise for him during his time in Toronto. But no, I don't think it's possible to get Marner here. I think the Devils can make use of their money elsewhere. Similar to what I said last offseason when people were speculating that Brady Tkachuk could be traded to the Devils. I just said you would have to give an arm and a leg in order to get Tkachuk in New Jersey, which means you would have to gut pretty much your core pieces, which wasn't going to happen. The Senators weren't going to give up Tkachuk, and the Devils weren't going to gut their core. Just no way. So I didn't think that was realistic, and I don't think Marner is realistic either. I don't even think the Devils are going to entertain talking to Marner. I think they're going to try to find different avenues to fill out their roster. You don't have to break the bank for more scoring. You just got to try something else because the players you had on the roster just didn't work out. But there's other options available and more realistic options, if that makes sense. So that's my final verdict when it comes to Marner potentially joining the Devils. Okay. I said I wanted to use this third and final segment to sort of vent my frustrations. Last year, at around this time, I believe, Sheldon Keefe was let go by the Maple Leafs. He made an announcement on his social media. It seems like he was at the beach and he just recorded him by the water saying, hey, not returning to Toronto. Thanks for everything. I'd say that Keefe had 5 productive years with the Maple Leafs. They were always good in the regular season. They were always an offensive threat. He helped lead the Maple Leafs past the first round for the first time since 2004. I believe he did that in 2023. They eventually lost to, ironically, the Panthers, who went on to appear in the Stanley Cup final, but that was the year in which the Panthers lost to the Golden Knights. But I even said it then. I think the Devils got a steal when it comes to Sheldon Keefe because I didn't believe he was the problem in Toronto. I think this is an issue in the NHL and maybe just sports in general. I feel like coaches are the first ones to be blamed if something is going wrong, but when things are going right, they're given the least amount of credit. I think Sheldon Keefe fell victim to that. So the Maple Leafs move on from him and they bring on Craig Berube. Like I said, Craig Berube, Stanley Cup champion, behind the bench with the Blues, won a championship alongside Jake Allen as one of the goalies. Got to give him a lot of credit. But look what just happened. The Maple Leafs, they make it past the first round. Okay, that's good. They beat those allegations, but they still got stopped in 7 by the Panthers. And with all the hype surrounding Game 7, I must say that was one of the most boring games I've watched just because you knew the Leafs weren't going to win because early on in the second period, they allowed, 3 goals? And you just knew that they were not going to win. So this just sparked a discussion on social media, which is like, Sheldon Keefe has to be smiling ear to ear watching this unfold. I mean, I don't know Sheldon Keefe on a personal level like that. I don't know how he feels towards Toronto. I'm sure he wasn't too happy to lose his job, but I'm sure he had to feel some sense of relief saying like he wasn't the issue. He wasn't the problem. And the fact that Austin Matthews said that there were too many passengers on the Leafs roster and Marner agreeing with him, that kind of says something if you ask me. I think we need to get to a point where we stop blaming the coaches. I think Sheldon Keefe last year during the playoffs, he did an excellent job of adapting. Let me give you an example. The Maple Leafs lost in the first round, yes, but they were missing Austin Matthews for a few games, and they were also missing William Nylander for a few games. Nylander, arguably one of the best playoff contributors on the Maple Leafs. Austin Matthews, he scored 69 goals in the regular season. That's a big blow. But yet the fact that Keefe was still able to rally the troops and force it to a game 7 in Boston, that says something. And here's the thing. It's not like the Maple Leafs lost in embarrassing fashion like they did the other night to the Panthers. That game against the Bruins went into overtime, and David Pastrnak scored the game-winning goal. So the Maple Leafs battled until the very end. And yet Sheldon Keefe still lost his job. When are we going to get to a point where we acknowledge that maybe the coach isn't the issue? Some people, after the Devils lost to the Hurricanes in 5, albeit not many, were blaming Sheldon Keefe for the Devils' struggles. I'm just like, no. Sheldon Keefe worked with what he was being given. Let's think about this. The Devils did not have Jack Hughes. They had lost him in early March due to that freak accident in which he had to get season-ending shoulder surgery. The Devils' bottom 6 was not really all that efficient. Sheldon Keefe even said it after, game 3 or game 4? He said it after one of those games, and he just said he had to work with what he was being given, kind of throwing some shade towards Fitzy, saying like, look, I'm trying to get the most out of them, but you can't really expect them to just like catch lightning in a bottle. Sheldon Keefe, I'd say the Devils have been the biggest challenge for the Hurricanes so far in the playoffs, because the Hurricanes handled the Capitals with ease. But when they were playing the Devils, 2 games went into double overtime. Hard-fought battle right till the end. Who was the tougher opponent, the Devils or the Capitals? I think most people will say the Devils. That's just my opinion. But I think we need to get to a point where we stop blaming the coach. That's my tangent. That's how I'm going to close out today's episode. Sheldon Keefe was never the problem. If anything, the Devils should be sending Christmas cards to Toronto. Thank you for giving us this gift. Sheldon Keefe is the right man for the job. He worked with what he was being given. And I think despite everything the Devils went through, he knew how to rally the troops together and make sure that the Devils stayed afloat and made the playoffs. But that's just my 2-cent opinion. Let me know your thoughts. What do you think of the possibility of the Devils pursuing Marner? Is it worth it in the grand scheme of things? And what are your thoughts on Sheldon Keefe and his future with New Jersey? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment down below if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening on podcast streaming service, hit me up on my personal X Page app at TreyMatt4 or the show's X Page app at Locked On Devils. As for today's episode, that's all the time I have for you. Continue to stay safe. Have a wonderful day, New Jersey. Go Devils. I'll catch you guys next episode. Thanks for listening once again.